skirt the line. She's not her father, who would like shoot first, ask questions later. You know, her father blew up Silurian bases without even a second thought. She at least tries to do other things before she gets to the final option. And then, of course, we need the doctors to save the situation because it's gotten out of hand because she's basically fighting herself. So I just think Kate's really good in this. I love the fact that this is the first time we've been introduced to Osgood, who became a fan favorite. But I just really like the way UNIT is shown here because they're not just boots on the ground. They're actually thinking and they're actually doing sciencey things and analyzing and trying to figure out the situation. So I really like the way UNIT from Moffat onward has been portrayed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Osgood is a great character, obviously a stand-in character for a lot of fans. She literally is the cosplayer on the show, pulling together different aspects of the previous Doctor's costumes. She's clearly read all the UNIT files, probably memorized all of them. She's definitely our character on the show, more or less. But obviously many, many times smarter than I will ever be.
Oh, Ingrid Oliver is a massive, like, I'm sure there are people, but I don't know anyone who doesn't love Ingrid Oliver. I don't know anyone who doesn't love Osgood. I don't know anyone that wouldn't love to see her back in some form.
Yeah, it was interesting that she got some references in Power of the Doctor and elsewhere that they talk about calling Osgood and that kind of thing. But hopefully you're right that she comes back and becomes part of whatever is next.
Anything else you wanted to mention, you two?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to two things. One, if you haven't read the novelization by Stephen Moffat, I highly recommend it. I don't want to give any spoilers for the book because there are a lot of great Easter eggs in there, but it really adds a lot of context and humor to what we see on screen in terms of things that maybe they couldn't do for time reasons or budgetary reasons. But also, there are just a lot of great jokes in there that I'm sure he enjoyed writing into the story that wouldn't have been able to do on screen.
Yeah, the novel is definitely Moffat at his Moffatiest. So if you love Moffat, you will love this novel. The other small thing also tying into UNIT is I really like when they get into the Black Archives. And I wish we'd had a little bit longer to linger on the board with the fact that we find out that Clara supposedly has been there and been mind wiped every time. Mm. And then there's the whole board of like all the companions that ever were, and at least, you know, and Clara's looking, and there's a focus especially on Susan. So we have these, you know, beautiful pictures of Caroline Ford, and you see a couple other people along there. And even in the Black Archives, you know, there's the Jack Harkness reference. You see a pair of River Song's shoes, the Louboutins that she was wearing in Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. As much as old school fans, I think at the time, were a little heartbroken that we didn't have older Doctors in there. It wasn't just a nostalgia fest. I think that particular scene, especially if we were able to go in there and like, you know, do a 3D, you know, walkthrough, I think there were a lot more Easter eggs than we could see on screen. And even the stuff we saw on screen was pretty cool. So I like all those little nods because Moffat is a fan too.
There were just interesting combinations of companions on some of those photos. The one that really made me laugh was Sarah Kingham and Mike Yates. Like,
I missed that.
How did they ever that's kind of one of the ones that they show pretty prominently when they first show the board. There's a picture of Sarah Kingham and Mike Yates together, and you're like, how is that even possible? Where they were in the same room at the same time. The other thing I just wanted to mention is, speaking of the Black Archive, I did want to mention the Black Archive book series did a great book by Alistair Stewart where they looked at the Day of the Doctor and looked at all the different aspects of the show in general for the anniversary, but also this particular episode and some of the subtext and that kind of thing. So I definitely enjoyed reading that when it came out. And, of course, it was number 50, which makes sense.
I mean, good Lord, if we did like an Easter egg count, that's another pod all of its own. There's nothing that Moffat does not know. I'm sure the novelization is just like early drafts of the script. Some nice bits as well that were in this was when we first see Tennant, which was Queen Elizabeth, and as she mentioned, she's the Queen of England, and Tennant he says, I'm not English, which the first level is like, well, the Doctor is not English. But the second layer, and I would suspect it's intentional, was that Tennant himself is not English, even though he's playing English when he plays the Doctor. It's nice now that Doctors don't have to do that anymore, and they can use their natural accent like Capaldi did, like Whittaker did, and it seems that Nshute's going to get to do that as well.
Although there is that moment where the 11th Doctor refers to him as Dick Van Dyke, sort of addressing that idea that this isn't your real accent that you're using in this role.
Yes, it's like bizarre mockney, and we'll accept it.
The line in the Black Archive when they look at Captain Jackson's vortex manipulator and like, yeah, no one knows about, none of our allies know about this, and it's like, why not? It's like Americans with the power to rewrite history. You've seen all their movies, and very good joke at the time. Slightly hits different when I think of certain politicians in states like Florida.
Yeah.
Please keep that out of their hands. The Zygon plot line. I mean, some ways that may have been a trial balloon for the Zygon inversion 2-parter that comes along in Capaldi's tenure.
Yeah, also, actually, and this actually comes up in my essay in the book that we're sort of kind of talking about, or will be, there were rumors before Tennant announced that he was leaving, and it was announced that Moffat was coming in. There were rumors that Moffat was trying to keep Tennant on the show for at least a year, and I know there must have been some talk, as Moffat has mentioned in interviews, that he actually had plans for season 5 if the 10th Doctor had stayed, and how the Amy Pond story would have played out, this and that. But there were rumors at the time that Moffat actually was promising, if Tennant stayed, that he would get a Zygon story, because Tennant's favorite monster apparently were Zygons. So I almost wonder if that was a bone that was thrown, not in a bad way, because I love it. And Zygons happen to be one of my favorite monsters too, that the Zygon plot kind of came in there partially organically because, okay, we've got David Tennant, I promised him Zygons, let me work with Zygons now. Like, maybe that wasn't his first thought as to what he was going to do, but once he got David, okay, Zygons, what are we going to do with them? And then brainstorm from there.
This episode, I mean, you could argue it's already the case. This episode, I think, maybe positions Clara as, not maybe to the fans, but in the show, as the most important of all the companions. Because you have, without her, and also the moment / Rose, the Time War continues as it was, and history isn't changed. You need Clara, that's why she's there to stop him. But also, at the end, when they're all going separate ways of 3 Doctors, and she says to 11, you want to be alone, you're Peyton. He goes, how do you know? And she goes, I always know. Now, I don't always think this came through on screen, but it's clearly written that she knows the Doctor better than anyone, because she's been through his entire timeline up to midway through the 12th.
She's not my favorite, but she's definitely up there. But I think to some extent, I think there's additions because of the fact that she's gone through Name of the Doctor. But I think any companion in that particular position, anybody who had been the companion at that point, would have affected the Doctor. If you think going back to Virus of Pompeii, Donna stopped the Doctor from doing things. Amy stopped the Doctor from doing certain things. So part of at least the modern companion is to be the moral voice and to stop him and find a way to put the brakes on things. But she gets the extra stuff because, she's been through the whole timeline because of the episode before. So there's added stuff there. But I'd like to argue that if any other companion had been there, they would at least, the way they went about it might have been different, but they still would have had been the person to stop him because that's what they did.
And as we saw in the Waters of Mars, we'll see what happens when there is no companion there.
Certainly that's one of the complaints that you commonly hear about Clara, is that she's made out to be the most important companion. I mean, she's the one who goes through his whole timeline. She's the one later who visits the Doctor as a child. And essentially she leaves the show because she's trying to be too much like the Doctor, and that ends up backfiring on her, but she still gets to go out into the universe and have her own TARDIS and have her own companion and have her own adventures as the Doctor. So, I mean, that's certainly one of the common complaints about the character. I mean, I don't know that Moffat started out with that plan, but that seems to have been how it kind of evolved. And some people really like that and some people don't.
It doesn't bother me because it feels like to me like every modern companion has been the most important person ever at the time. You've got Rose, who literally becomes the TARDIS and a goddess and is, killing Daleks with her mind and this and that, and she saves the Doctor. Then Donna is the most important person, and she becomes the Doctor, and she's, she'll never know, but she's basically saved all of time and space, etc. Amy has her positives. River has her positives. I think the companions always seem to be getting one-upped each time somebody new comes in. The modern companion is different than the original series companion who were there, but they were more like to ask the questions while the Doctor pontificated and did his thing.
Well, also, one thing I actually noticed on the rewatch is the part in the episode as the Doctors are figuring out that they don't have to trigger the moment and they don't have to burn Gallifrey. The music that's playing is actually the music that's associated with Capaldi's tenure. It's the music that's playing at the culmination of Heaven's Sent and also during his regeneration. That theme that Murray Gold wrote, I'd never noticed it before, but it's the same piece of music. Oh,
I missed that. I'm going to have to listen again.
Yeah, if you ever go back, you'll actually realise it. And it's not turned up as loud. It's done for Capaldi, it's turned up very loud, and I think you get a longer version of it. But you do hear it. Clearly they liked it so much that Murray Gold repurposed it for Capaldi's time. And the only other thing, because we haven't really spoken much about Tom Baker's appearance, and I think I've said before, it makes no sense, and I don't care, because it's wonderful. This is the difference in storytelling between being narratively coherent and emotionally coherent. Kind of similar to aspects of Avengers Endgame. It doesn't make sense as far as plotting goes, and there's so much hold on. If we just stop for a second, that can't happen because of this and this. But emotionally, in terms of how it made you feel, it makes total sense. Because I wouldn't change that. I wouldn't change anything about that.
Tom Baker was my first Doctor, so I always have an emotional reaction to that, even when, I know it's silly because, it doesn't make a lot of sense in there. But I think Moffat purposely left it nebulous. So is it the fourth Doctor just aged up for some reason, or is it some future Doctor who's using the same face? And obviously Russell has then taken a page from that to give us 14. It set a precedent now that we can actually revisit faces when we want to.
The only thing that I'll mention is I kind of like the curator as a mysterious sort of figure. Big Finish has gone back and put him into actual stories. I mean, it's kind of fun to hear Tom Baker be the curator again, but it kind of ruins just a little bit of the mystery of the character as we see it in Day of the Doctor.
And I think not everything has to be explained or carved out in stone as to this is what it really was. Sometimes the mystery is nice just to be the mystery.
I like having things to be ambiguous. Read some comments online where they say, well, this is a plot hole or that's a plot hole or whatever. And some of them are legitimate plot holes, but a lot of them are things that are deliberately left ambiguous for a reason, such as who exactly is the curator? That's not a plot hole. That's something that Moffat very deliberately made it in a way that you could have your own interpretation of it. And there are many examples of that in his tenure where he purposely just makes things a little vague so that you can come up with your own stories, because I think he thinks that that's almost as important, if not as important, as what you see on screen, is letting your imagination fill in a lot of the blanks that are left in the actual televised stories.
And hanging around in fandom circles, it gives you something to sit there and do an entire panel at a convention or just late night over drinks to be sitting there and theorizing what this means or what that means, etc. So I agree with that.
It's something Moffat himself has spoken about in terms of praising the Time War, that there's so much of it that was left blank.
Will we ever find out what happened with during the Time War, like a part of a series devoted to exactly what happened?
There's nothing. Let me take you back all those many, many years when you first saw Star Wars and that really exciting moment where Obi-Wan Kenobi said, the Clone Wars. Yeah. And your little child brain went, whoa, that must be fantastic. There's millions of clones, they're all identical, they were grown in vat, they probably carried the vats, and they were all clones, new clones growing from trees, brilliant. And then it showed up and there was a bunch of meetings. You can't ever live up to something like that, can you? So you've got Russell tossing off these lines, like I love, it's my favourite stuff of his work is, I was there at the fall of Arcadia. Of course you were, what's that? The Gates of Elysium, the Medusa Cascade. Yeah. What's ever going to live up to that? Have you seen our budget?
Like Time Lords among themselves are too complicated for humans to understand. Maybe the Time War itself is too dense and complex for humans to grasp, which is why you could never put it on screen. It's not something I actually want to see.
Yeah, I see a lot of fans who are constantly, I want a Time War series. I don't want to see it. I want to think about it. Big Finish has dealt with it, and sometimes it's fun to, visit incidents during the Time War. But I don't think it would work on screen, and I would rather just leave it as it is. There's some things that are better left to your imagination.
I just think a lot of it would just be so complicated in a way that would just blow the minds of the average viewer that I don't think it would be worth it. I mean, some people say, coming back to Day of the Doctor, they criticize what we actually see on the screen of the Time War in Day of the Doctor, that it's sort of not exciting enough. It's kind of mundane, but it's also the